Welcome everyone. My name is Erik Akervall and I'm a current board member of Nordic Northwest and may know some of the people in this show we're showing tonight as well. Thank you all so much for logging in and joining us tonight. We are so excited to show The Hunt for the Sea's Black Gold. We're also pleased to be joined by the director and producer Erik Akervall all the way in Sweden, where I think it's about 4 a.m. So we're so happy you're here, Erik. Erik will be communicating with an American Sign Language interpreter, Bryce. Thank you, Bryce, for being here with us. We are streaming live from Nordic Northwest. For those who may not know Nordic Northwest, it's a non-profit focused on the 5 Nordic nations. Nordic Northwest aims to highlight, honor, educate, communicate, promote and celebrate Nordic culture and traditions, both ancestral, modern, and contemporary. By joining in tonight, you're supporting our mission, so we thank you. A little bit about Erik. Erik was born in Stockholm, Sweden, and became deaf when he was 1.5 years old. Today, he's 37 years young and feels privileged to be part of a fantastic minority of the deaf world. Erik has been able to travel and see the world and mastered 7 languages. Somehow I only do 4, so he got me beaten there. As a director and producer, Erik has made several award-winning sign language series and films and have been broadcasted on TV in different countries such as Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and the UK. Before we start watching the show, Erik, would you like to say a few words?
Hello, everyone. It's hard to talk about myself, but I like everyone else telling my story. But first and foremost, I'm proud to be here. I'm humbled for the opportunity for Nordic Northwest to represent my film. I'm elated. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Erik. And before we start the show, remember, there's going to be a question and answer session with Erik after the show. Please write your questions in the chat and they will get to me somehow and we'll read them up. All right, let's roll. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you so much for watching. That was a great show, and Erik, thank you so much for all of that work that went into making this awesome production. So, wow. I mean, it takes me back every time I see this. And the lobster is such a wonderful animal, and it's so good to eat. So I can just, remember sitting on the dock, eating lobster and having a cold beer. So thank you so much for making this. So we have 2 questions from the chat we'll start out with. So in the United States, lobster populations are changing because of climate change. Are you seeing the same thing in Sweden?
Yeah, actually, yes and no. I recall growing up, it was never an issue getting lobster. Within the last decade, I would say, I have noticed the populations are shrinking because there are a lot more female lobsters, and now it's forbidden to actually hunt those, and so you're seeing the population sort of grow. So I think it's a silver lining. In regards to climate change, I haven't really seen that much more of a difference. I think it's more what humans have done.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, how were you able to get those aerial shots?
I can fly. Actually, I have a small drone that I utilize, so that's how I get it. It's always exciting every time I launch that on the ocean. It's also a little terrifying because it could crash, but you just got to take a leap of faith and be brave.
So is it a good idea to send off your drone from the boat and then the boat moves, and then they run out of battery, and then it tries to go back and land at the spot you send it off. Is that how drones work? I'm just curious. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it actually has a GPS locator right from the start. So actually, one time I started from the boat, actually right on the ocean. However, when we were departing, I noticed that the battery was about to die, and the drone wanted to go back to that original location. It sort of memorized that GPS location. I realized, no shit, it's on water, so we had to get back to that location. So it did almost crash. Crisis averted. I'm not sure how it happened, but we were able to land the drone safely. I do remember it cut our dad's hand because it was a large drone. So that was a few years ago. This time, what I did, we departed on land on the island. So we started there. So that way it would know where the original location was. And so you just, you learn from your mistakes.
That's wonderful. Another question that came in from the chat is, I am wondering how the audio aspect of your filmmaking works as a deaf filmmaker. The music and the sounds are great.
Wow, it's actually a huge challenge for me. 2 years ago, I decided to get a cochlear implant. And I've always been fascinated with the idea of sound because I was born hearing and I became deaf, most of my childhood. I did realize that music is a huge part of my life. I recall my childhood really loving music, and I just learned off the fly from YouTube videos how to work with sound design, how to build stories, aligning it with sound. And so that is how I was able to embed all of that. But I did have an idea of how to work with sound before I started filming. And it's a real different experience, not being able to use sound right now, but I'm up for the challenge. And I really look forward to different challenges. And I didn't really feel like it was that much of a hassle. It felt very organic to me, which is a little bizarre, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So another question.
Oh, I actually have a question. Did you like the music?
I love the music. It really transcends the feeling when you're there. The ocean and the sea and the smell of salt and the birds are screaming in the background or flying over you and yeah, it really brought that together. So I did really enjoy it.
And that is what I wanted to do. I wanted to actually get people to sort of transport there. And I think that's really key, to have that environment, to align it with the sound. And it's an interesting experience. And when I made that film, I was working on the final draft. And I wasn't really sure if I was done. So I had a focus group that came in, which involved 10 people that viewed the film, all shapes and walks of life, deaf, hard of hearing, elder population, young population, and they provided feedback for me. Someone did say that the music really sort of drowned out, and I did realize that the environmental sound is really what makes it feel like you're there. So with that feedback, I took a step back. I did some editing. I really emphasized the environmental sounds. The music is there to sort of supplement and enhance the feeling, not take it over, though.
That's great. Thank you, Erik. Another question from the chat. What a wonderful friendship the men in the film have, but not very many young people. Are young people following into lobster fishing as well?
Could you repeat your question?
Yes. It was a wonderful friendship the men had. So the two Akkes. But they're not young anymore. And is there a lot of other young people that are into lobster fishing?
That's a great question. Actually, I am unaware of that. I don't see many other lobster fishermen. I would think that it would dissolve. I don't think a lot of people have access to boats and awareness and that tradition getting passed down in family. So maybe it's up to you and I to continue the profession.
I'm up for the task if you are.
Absolutely, I'm up for it too.
That's awesome. In terms of filming,
it's tough. It's a tough life, and it's a different lifestyle. I followed them for a good week, and I was exhausted afterwards. And I'm a hard worker, and I know that I am, but this was a totally different world, and I felt leaps and bounds more difficult. But they sort of go through inclement weather, rain, snow. It didn't matter. They were very adaptable. And I thought that they really had the skills to tailor to what the environment gave them. And they just accepted and they stayed in the moment and they recognized what the environment was and went with it. It was really impressive to see that in those elements. And I thought that was a really cool takeaway.
That's great. In terms of filming, was it difficult to film while on the sea?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't have any sort of a stabilizer, and I just used the hands that you see, and the choppy waters, the ebbs and flows was definitely a challenge with the sea. But I really wanted to sort of incorporate that essence into the film. I wanted to give it an authentic feel. So again, I just rolled with it. But yeah, it was definitely challenging.
Makes sense. What was it like to experience your father's pastime through the eyes of a filmmaker and not just the son?
Oh, wow. It's a really interesting. While I'm watching this film right now, rewatching it, this is probably the 100th time. I didn't really feel like it was work. It didn't feel like a job. It felt like just a personal sort of hobby. This boat is 120 years old. It was our grandfather's boat being passed down. And growing up, sleeping in that boat, we did everything in that boat. Seeing my father sort of bob and weave through the elements, it's really hard to grasp, and it's such a bizarre experience that I was a fly on the wall. I was able to experience everything and how they did their day-to-day. And I felt more confident than I thought I would be. And so that was really cool to experience. And and clarify, it was cool to see his confidence and see a different side of him that I've never seen before.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
But it was hard to film your own father, to be blunt. There were some sort of questions that he didn't want to answer. And maybe it's because we didn't have that. We know each other very well. And so I wonder if I couldn't get everything that I wanted. And my initial vision transformed into something else based off of how our father sort of answered the questions.
Interesting. He's often a talker, so I have a hard time imagining he not having a lot of things to share. So that must have been an interesting experience.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very interesting. But I actually wanted to mention, it was a tough time here when I was there with COVID-19 pandemic. I was unemployed. I didn't have a job for 6 months. And I noticed that my grandfather's films from years ago, watching that, and I was inspired. So I actually decided to go with the idea in mind just to have fun. And I obviously did have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you documenting this for future generations as well. When our daughters grow up, maybe they will also get into lobster fishing.
That'd be great. And I love that documentation. It's immortalized. And my daughter is 8, or soon will be 8, and she's seen a few times, and she even talks about what a great experience it is. And she might make her own version of me doing something. And so maybe the apple won't fall far from the tree.
Yeah. What was your favorite part of creating the film?
Ooh. I believe that there's 3 different stages in production. It's almost like as an idea, then it's birthed into the editing phase, building the story, and then the post-production. So there's 3 different phases. And while I look back, I really loved being there, filming, seeing how they interacted with each other, or sometimes they didn't even talk at all. And, a man of very few words at times. And I thought that they would be a little bit more talkative, but I realized that they do the opposite. They show that they're very quiet, and I really appreciated that they were more stoic. And so they tell a story without any sort of language, which I really appreciated.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it does resonate given the fact that they're not, really answering your questions really well. So maybe it's a lobster fishing kind of thing where you're supposed to look cool, look for the horizon, and kind of enjoy your environment.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head.
Yeah.
It's just simple as that, enjoying the environment.
So we have more questions in the chat, but keep them coming. The next one is, I'm wondering if you like to fish.
Of course. I love fishing, but, as a person, I don't really have as much patience as my father, so I do enjoy with a beer in hand, having a couple hours, but that's the shelf life. There's an expiration date, and so I'd like to go home. What I really enjoy is being out in nature and doing something. I think a lot of people, when they go out and fish, it's about getting something. And I've really realized and evolved into not really getting any sort of fish or lobsters. It's really about doing something in nature and not having this mission of getting something at the end of it. And I think fishing is about being in the elements and being rejuvenated.
Absolutely.
And I think that part, being in the boat, and there's something that changes inside after being in nature. It's like chicken soup for the soul.
Yeah, leaving your cell phone on the dock and just enjoying where you're at.
Exactly.
Another question from the chat. how many months per year can you fish lobster, and which months can you fish?
It's in September in Sweden, so September to December for lobster fishing. If you're a hobby fisherman, but if you're a professional, that goes till December. A hobbyist would be November. So it's really a short time frame. And what it does is that's where you see the population grow. You're not overfishing and destroying the population. And I think it's really important to be mindful of that, not to get greedy, because if we do get greedy, we do know what the outcome is. We see it all over the world right now, shrinking populations. It's really hard for these ecosystems to go back to the natural population that they once were. And as humans, we have a responsibility to take care of that. And also, it really affects pricing of lobsters. You see inflation, it becomes a little bit more expensive, and so there are some blemishes that come with that. I think maybe 300-400 years ago, lobster used to be considered a cheap person's food. So it was more for impoverished families to eat lobster because it was an abundant source of it. Times have changed, and I find that fascinating. In a short time frame, in 200-300 years, it went from something that was looked down upon to something that's revered and something that's exclusive.
Yeah. It's interesting how time changes things, for sure.
Absolutely.
Another question from the chat is, where did you learn to be a filmmaker? Did you go to school for it?
Learning the art of film, I didn't learn that in school. I do have a bachelor's of art in production, specifically media. So I am a producer, but it's so boring just to sit and work on a budget. And so I pivoted and I wanted to be more interactive. I wanted to share stories. And so I just went ahead and did it. I just filmed, edited, and it was just a trial and error type of process to where we are today.
That's great.
But it's not easy. It is tough. And it takes a long time to get to that professional level. And how do you define what is professional? That's something that I struggle with. And I think film is personal. You take someone else's story, but then it becomes yours. It morphs into that. And that is it's a tightrope on how do you respect the initial story? How do you make it feel like there's a balance, being open but not overexposure? And that's a hard sort of balance of trying to make sure of being sensitive, but then also sharing a story.
I feel like your movies and films are always very visual. Do you think that it has to do with something that you are deaf?
That's a great question. And yeah, the deaf community typically says we have deaf eyes. I'm not sure because me being deaf makes me a better filmmaker. But I do see things that other people cannot. I wasn't born with that skill, but it's something that I fine-tuned and learned how to utilize. I would say, for 25 years, I haven't had any access to sound. And so I immersed myself, how can I tell a story with just the visual part? And now I'm able to align it with sound, and they're able to work together. and I find it a little bit more powerful. And I do feel like they can commingle. But I also should not be afraid to have too much sound. And I've noticed that people are a little afraid to watch films or short stories in YouTube without sound. There's a fear to that. And lack of sound, I feel like it can also give us something that we haven't seen before. It allows us to be a little bit more aware and grasp the different finer details that we might miss.
Absolutely. The absence of sound is also a feeling, or it's sound itself almost.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's very well said.
So one question from the chat. Swimming in that cold sea, was that after a sauna, or did he just jump in the cold water?
Yeah, I just went ahead and jumped in. There was no sort of preparation, and I really wanted to just embrace that lifestyle, drinking beer, fishing, swimming, and I thought it was rather cool. And then jumping into the sea, I felt like there's definitely a change on their face. And even though it was cold and they were able to like wake up, they've got humor. And I noticed that they are almost kids when they are out there. And when they jump into that cold sea, it's almost like they radiate and there's something that recalibrates. And it's almost like they are like restored. And I don't look at them as old. I look at them as they've just lived a very long time.
That's great. So we're almost up at time here, and I know you have a 6 a.m. train up to Härnösand in northern Sweden. So here's the last question from the chat, and that is, what is your next project?
Good question. I'm working on a new project with a Norwegian company. A few years ago that we worked together, we made a show called Floating Sauna. And that was like an interview show. And it was in Toronto on the water. And it was a very intimate show, an interview type of environment. And then we're going to prolong that into a season. And then it's 8 meters up in a lecture house. And we'll have an interview there in a tree. And we'll sort of connect to taboo topics and things that happen in our deaf community that we don't normally talk about. We have a silent culture, and we want to start unpacking different issues within our community and showcase that. The deaf community is an oppressed minority, and we don't have the same access to language and information, work opportunities. Here in Sweden, there are a lot of deaf individuals that do get an education at the university, but 80 to 85% don't end up getting a job in their degree. And that's something that I want to talk about. It's unfortunate. And this show will really rely on unpacking the oppression, making people liberated, and talking about the issues that we face.
Wow, that is really important, and I'm really looking forward to see that when it's going to be sent on, obviously Norwegian TV, but I'm hoping it's going to also be sent all over Europe because it's a really important topic.
Yeah, it will be international. It'll be viewed on that website. And the floating sauna, it will be showed in over 30 different countries and 100,000 viewers. And so I definitely think it'll be very visible. And that's why I went ahead and wanted to do this again. I've also noticed that a lot of different people in different communities throughout the world, they've talked about oppression. They talk about the issues within the community, and I feel like we can do the same. And I think it can have a positive impact on people's lives. And it's a great experience, and I'm humbled to be a part of it. So really looking forward to it. And I'm proud to say that my job is great. It's just very challenging. But in this family, we do love challenges, right? And now everyone knows that.
We certainly do. We certainly do. Well, thank you so much, Erik, for being here. And thank you, Bryce, for interpreting for us. And thank you all so much for supporting Nordic Northwest. And we hope that you enjoyed this program. If you have enjoyed it,
thank you, everyone.
Please check out Nordic Northwest's website and social media to learn more about our future programs. Thank you all, and have a good night.